Hi everyone, and welcome to another interview for Emotional Autoimmunity interview series. And today I'm really excited to be talking to Yael all the way from Johannesburg over in South Africa. So we've had quite a good time trying to work out a date when both of us could do this. So I'm very excited to talk to her today. And before I let you hear from Yael, just what I'm going to do is tell you just a little brief bit about it because she's going to have so much to tell us about herself. So Yael Goodman is the author of Taking Control, My Journey to Reverse Autoimmune Disease. So you've got a pretty good clue there that that's what we're going to be talking about, is the autoimmune side of things. She lives in Johannesburg in South Africa, and she blogs and writes full-time about her life with her chronic autoimmune conditions and all of her different experiences she's had on her journey so far. So welcome, Yael. It's so great to meet you and talk to you.
Lovely to meet you too, Kerry, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And can you just share with us what health issues do you have and how do they affect your day-to-day life?
Okay, I have 3 autoimmune conditions, in fact, and they are celiac disease, Hashimoto's, which is the underactive thyroid, and multiple sclerosis, or MS as it's known. And it's actually quite tricky to know sometimes which disease is actually causing which symptoms that I have. So that's actually quite a hard one. And sometimes I struggle to kind of actually know and I worry about it. And then other times I just go, it doesn't really matter. They're all part of the same autoimmune process. And so whatever is causing whatever symptoms, I can't really worry about it. To be honest, my celiac disease is it is in remission. I've had follow-up blood tests and my antibodies are completely gone. And my follow-up biopsy of my gut showed it was completely healed. My MS, I've had follow-up MRIs, and that is all under control and doing really well. And in fact, it's my Hashimoto's that actually gives me the most amount of symptoms and problems. And I'd say of all 3 conditions, that's actually the one I struggle with the most, and it's the one I'm still working on and trying to get that sorted out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so many of us have that big handful of autoimmune conditions, don't we? And you're exactly right in saying it's hard to know sometimes which one it is. And I sort of go between, I think my celiac disease is pretty much there, still a few lingering gut issues going on. But you're right, the Hashimoto's is the one that's the bit of the devil.
It's the trickiest.
It's a trickiest one to manage.
Yes.
And what do you think was the hardest part for you emotionally about coming to terms with your illness? Because I know from reading your book, it was a really long process with lots of, issues and suffering until you finally got an answer.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was getting a diagnosis in the first place, because I had so many symptoms and was originally told I had fibromyalgia, which is a sort of a controversial topic because there are people that have the true fibromyalgia and then the people that have fibromyalgia that actually masks as other autoimmune conditions. But yes, emotionally it was really tough not knowing that I had so many symptoms and so much pain in every part of my body and so much fatigue, but I didn't have a diagnosis. And then getting the diagnosis you'd think would be the greatest thing, but it wasn't really, because there isn't actually, oh, here, take this pill and you can be much better. There's no actual solution. So I think the hardest part for anyone with a chronic illness is knowing that this isn't just like the flu. It isn't just going to go away after a week of staying in bed and, having some soup. You can get better, you can get worse, but ultimately we're kind of stuck with it for, at this stage, as long as we know.
And
that's hard.
You're right. I think that's an ongoing process, isn't it? Because I know with myself, there's days where I feel like there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. And I'll get to the point where I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's gone away. You know, maybe, I don't know, something's happened. And then the next day will be, oh, yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's still there. Something's going on.
Exactly, especially if you on the days when you feel really good, and then you tend to overdo it on those days because you think, I feel so good, so I must try and do all the things I want to do and love to do, and then the next day you're like, oh dear, I shouldn't have done that. So yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, and it is that thing that it is, you know, that I think that's the hardest thing to wrap your mind around, that before your previous, you know, issue of getting sick was just you got sick and then you got better. But from the sounds of things, with all of your symptoms from childhood, you were never really well, were you?
No, well, exactly. That's the thing. I've never actually, I think at the moment, I'm the most well I've ever been in my life. There was never a stage when I was younger where I ever felt like I got better. I would have maybe 1 or 2 good days. But now I am, hopefully, touch wood, I have 1 or 2 bad days, which is, of course, the ultimate thing that I wanted in my life. So yeah, that's been the biggest change for me.
And you know, even people without chronic illness still have bad days, so I think that's
exactly
pretty good.
That's anyone. Yes, exactly, for sure.
So how do you deal with that ongoing process of coming to terms with it? Is there a particular, you know, method or that you use to sort of pick yourself up, or to come to terms with the fact that it is chronic?
I think that's been a process. I wouldn't say there's one or other particular thing. I think I used to be really, really hard on myself, and that was the thing that I've had to change. I would sort of beat myself up about it, or, you know, why don't you just do it, or push through it, or, you know, it doesn't matter, you just have to do it. And I had to learn to kind of go, you know what, I'm having a bad day, or I'm having a bad afternoon, and so I'm not going to push myself to do that. I'm actually just going to stop and go and have a nap for 20 minutes and then carry on. Or I'm going to just say, you know, I actually can't do this, sorry, or whatever it might be. I think that's something that I had to learn how to do. I used to definitely be somebody that would just go, well, if this is the way I am all the time, how do I not just push through? I think that was what was really hard. It wasn't a question of, you know, I feel so bad, but I have to force myself to do that. I just was always like that. So I didn't really know any different. And now I've had to say, you know, I learned to manage my time. I think that's what's really important for me. You know, if I know I've got a really busy week coming up, then I won't push myself to maybe do other things. Or if I'm feeling good, I'll go for an extra walk. It's okay because I'm feeling better this time, and I can relax afterwards. For me, relaxing is very hard. I do. That is something I struggle with a lot.
And that's my experience too, that I find I'm doing a thing called a 100-day gong, which I started at the start of the year. I committed to walking every day, which is probably the most I've done, you know, every single day since I actually got sick over 2 years ago. So it's a big thing for me. But even then, I don't push myself. Like if I'm feeling good, I'll go for a long walk and really enjoy it. But if I'm feeling really not so good, I'll get myself out the door, I go around the block, and then that's it. You know, as long as I've done that. And touch wood, so far I haven't had a day where I've been able to do at least a small walk. So it is part of that you've really got to learn to manage your time and your energy, don't you? Particularly if you've got a busy day coming up.
Yes, but that's fantastic that you're still doing the walking. Walking for me is huge, not just from a physical point of view, but from a mental, emotional point of view. I love my walks and walking.
Oh yeah, there's something just great about being outside, and you know, because we're in summer at the moment. We've had quite a changeable summer, so I've been walking out, you know, in the heat. I've been walking in the rain. I've just been out there in all of it, and it gives me a great sense of achievement, and I'm really proud of myself that I'm doing that. And I think that's those, you've got to find those small things that give you that feeling of achievement on a consistent basis, don't you?
Yes, but then you've also got to not be hard on yourself on the day you don't feel like going for a walk, and you just go, well, you know what, I'm just going to take it easy today, and I'm going to just rest. I'm not going to go, or whatever the thing might be. You just go, you know, that it's okay. You forgive yourself.
Oh, for sure. You know, if I've done a lot or I've overextended myself, then I know I'm probably going to have at least 2 days that I won't be doing anything. And initially, and even sometimes still, I get really impatient with myself, and I think of the things that I would like to be doing. But then I just think, okay, you know, you've got to deal with what's real. This is the way it is. You know, if you give yourself a couple of days just to rest, you're going to feel better and you'll be able to do more. So it's about like removing that guilt.
Yes.
And so hard on yourself, and just thinking, if this is all I can do, then I'm going to give myself permission to just enjoy what I can of it. And, you know, Netflix for me is a fantastic thing on those days.
I love Netflix. But I can binge watch. Sorry?
I said you can binge watch so many things. It's fantastic.
Oh, yes. No, for sure. But I can totally identify with that as well. So I do get that need.
Yes. Have you found that there's been any positive changes or insights that you would say have been a direct result of your illnesses?
For me, I'd possibly say the best benefit, if I can call it that, is possibly empathy for other people and understanding what they're going through, because it's something I've always had. It isn't kind of, oh, I had this life before where everything was so-and-so, then I got my illness and then things changed. It's something that's kind of been with me since I was really little. So for me, I understand that a lot. And especially when I worked doing my reflexology and Reiki and that practice, it helped a lot when I was working with clients and, you know, able to understand chronic pain, chronic fatigue, or whatever issues they might be going through. So for me, I guess it's that. And my interest in learning about the body and learning about nutrition and learning about health, and I think educating myself, I think that is the most critical thing that we can do for ourselves is to educate ourselves as much as possible.
Mm. You're absolutely right. And did you ever think when you were younger, going through all those things, did you think there was something wrong with you compared to other people?
Oh, for sure. I thought, I seemed so different to everybody else, and I didn't ever get better. There was always something wrong with me, and I definitely thought this must be something wrong with me. I wasn't like anyone else.
It must have been a really isolating experience for you, particularly growing up with so many things that you couldn't do and needing to sleep all the time, because I think that's what people don't understand unless they have chronic autoimmune illness, and particularly Hashi's. The exhaustion is just, it's overwhelming. And it's not like just being tired. It's not like doing a lot physically and feeling tired. Yes. It's almost at a cellular level, you have no energy. It's amazing.
That's exactly it. They say there's no tired like thyroid tired. And on top of that, when I was much younger, I was severely anemic. I was always very, very anemic. Of course, it took very, very long time to work out that was caused by my celiac disease, but I was always severely anemic, as well as having very underactive thyroid. So I just almost had zero energy. And it wasn't from a lack of wanting to do things. I liked exercise, I always have, but the amount of exhaustion or pain I would feel from simple things was really incapacitating and exhausting, and difficult.
Mm. And you've had
not an easy ride.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay. You've had a lot of experience with doctors, and I mean, what advice could you share for people who are, still going through the process of trying to find a diagnosis and find out what's wrong with them? What could you share with dealing with doctors in the medical profession that was the most empowering for you?
I think I kind of alluded to it earlier. The most important thing, I think, is to educate yourself. So if you understand things and know about things, you're not reliant on your doctor to tell you everything or to solve problems for you. the doctor is there to assist you and to guide you. So if you know all about your condition, or you know about other treatments, or you know about things, when you sit down with the doctor and they give you advice or they guide you, it becomes a two-way process. It should be a partnership with the doctor. It shouldn't be the doctor telling you, this is the way it is and you can take it or leave it. And the many doctors that did that to me over the years, that dismissed me, that did, denied certain things, that caused those kind of problems, that was very difficult for me. So for me, finding a doctor that wants to work with me, that wants to assist you, that wants you to read up, that wants you to educate yourself, those are the great doctors, not the ones that say to you, don't read everything you believe on books or the internet or something. I know everything. The ones that are willing to talk you through things, to recommend things, to that to me is, and communication is really important. The fact that they can communicate with you, that they come back to you, that they say, if you're not happy with this or you're not feeling well, let's discuss it. Let's see what we can do to help you. And I have gone through many doctors over the years, and I've also learned which doctors I know are there to assist with the sort of functional medicine side and helping me with that, and those that are there to do, they don't necessarily have the functional medicine spin on things, but it's okay because I'm seeing them for particular things. So I'll give you an example. My neurologist is not functionally medicine inclined, but I needed to see a neurologist to check on do neurological exam, have an MRI scan. If I do, for whatever reason in the future, have an MS episode, I will have a neurologist that will assist me if I need to go to hospital and get treated. But in the meantime, I use my functional medicine doctor to help me get my gut right, treat any infection, treat the autoimmunity part. And that will be the doctor I will tell all my stuff to, and she will help me. So if that kind of makes sense, because I've got so many illnesses and we tend to categorize medicine into categories. I have to have a gastroenterologist for my celiac disease. I have to have a neurologist for my MS, an endocrinologist for my thyroid. So each thing is going to be separated. And that's, I think that is a huge oversight in medicine in the first place. But that's why I think functional medicine is so great. And obviously it's very hard for them to specialize in everything, but if they can at least assist you with helping you. So for me, I see all autoimmune conditions as stemming from one particular source. And obviously it starts in the gut. There are many other things. So I use my functional medicine doctor helps me with treating all my autoimmune diseases. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question.
No, I think that's perfect, because so many people are in that position where, when they have a list of different illnesses, and because medicine is so specialized into specific areas of the body, they don't have the holistic view. Like, I know my thyroid affects every organ in my body. Like, I've seen cardiologists and all different sorts of things, and it has nothing to do with my heart. It was that just I had no thyroid hormones to power me properly. So you get shunted off to a whole lot of people who don't see the overall picture. And so if you are lucky enough to have a doctor that you can tie all that in with, in my case, I use my naturopath for that. Okay. So he's the one that's helped me rebuild my gut. He's got a great passion in gut. He's up on a lot of research. I can take all of my medical tests to him and he can read them and interpret them for me. And then we come up with the plan in conjunction with my doctor, who is very nice and very understanding, but doesn't really have the specific knowledge or overall interest. She's very willing to partner with me, and she knows that I do my research, and she's seen the evidence that it's worked so far for me and was at the beginning. So it's really about you finding ways to use it all to your advantage, I think.
Yes, exactly.
And I know from reading your book, I mean, some of it was just, it must have been horrendous to go through. I mean, you had some horrible tests done on you that ended up being totally unnecessary.
Yes. I used to say sometimes I felt like I was in an episode of House where they tend to experiment on you and they don't quite know what something is. So they assume it must be the worst possible conclusion. So they put you through a terrible batch of tests and invasive procedures only to actually come up with no conclusion, and then you kind of dismissed that they couldn't find anything. So yes, some of those traumas were really bad and affected me for a very long time in dealing with the medical profession. And in fact, I still do get a bit of anxiety when I have to go to a new doctor, in having to go through all the things that I've gone through and having to explain all the things again and, worry about things. And just to come back to your earlier question, one of the things that I also think is really important is that, and I do also emphasize that in my book, is how important it is to get copies of your blood tests and copies of your reports of things. Even if you can't necessarily read them, if you decide to change doctors or go to someone else that can assist you or help you, or a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor or even a homeopath or whoever, you can say, here are my tests, can you have a look? Or if you do know how to read them, you can see, because as you know from my book, I had some horrible incidents of doctors not actually coming back to me with the correct readings and telling me things were fine when they really weren't fine, particularly with my thyroid, which led to some horrible results and things happening. So yes, that is another important thing. Be proactive in your own health. I have a file with all my medical things in it, and every time I have tests or any procedures or anything, everything gets put into there, and then I can always keep track of everything.
And I think it's really important, and that's great advice. I have copies of all of my things, and mine are all stashed away in a drawer somewhere because I'm off to have a blood test again tomorrow, and I haven't had one for about 6 months. Okay. Because it felt for a while, particularly when I was at my worst, that I was having blood tests all the time, like weekly, fortnightly tests, and I didn't really like it. So I'm glad I'm at the stage now where I'm fairly balanced and even, and all I really want to do is maybe have twice a year unless something goes wrong, because it is difficult dealing with a whole lot of tests and procedures and things like that. So having your own copies, I think, is really important, and it gives you information. And there's plenty of resources out there on the web and everything that you can educate yourself and know how to read them.
I think that's fantastic to get to that position of only having to have sort of blood tests or your thyroid checked twice a year. That is sort of the ultimate goal. I know I'm at the stage at the moment where my levels are so up and down that I'm actually having the 2 weekly checks, but it's fine because I need to know what's going on because my medication is kind of changing. Yeah. I've got some strange results at the moment. So yeah, that is your ultimate. So congratulations for getting to that stage.
Thank you. That's, my doctor would prefer that I have them a lot more often. I'm just like, no.
That's funny.
I feel all right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that was really important for me, as far as the medical things. If it doesn't sound good to me, then I'm not going to do it. There are certain tests and things that I think I really don't want to know. Like, for example, to diagnose my celiac disease, I had the blood test, and my doctor said, well, look, you've got the antibodies. As far as I'm concerned, that's conclusive. You can go through and go and have the surgical, where they view that. I can't think of what the name is for it at the moment. And I looked up the procedure. Yes, I looked up the procedure. I saw that, there were risks involved. I saw that it wasn't 100%. And as far as I was concerned, I didn't need it because I knew what I had. I was not going to be eating gluten anyway because I was on the AAP diet. So I didn't see any point to putting myself through the risks of having that to confirm something that I already know that I have and that isn't going to alter the treatment. So I'm a very selective consumer of those different sorts of things. And I think that's, looking back with some of the tests mean, looking back at your own experiences with the knowledge you have now, do you think some of those tests you would have probably said, no, I'm not going to do it?
Well, I understand your point of view, but I actually think the celiac biopsy, so they have it's a gastroscope or endoscope where they put the pipe down with the camera and go into the first part of the small intestine and actually take biopsies from there and have a look at the gut lining. And for me, that was actually very important, because blood tests can also, that come back with the antibodies, can also show up non-celiac gluten sensitivity, where you're actually sensitive to gluten, but you don't actually have celiac. And actually having that biopsy of the small intestine will confirm that it is celiac disease. And the only reason that is important is if you need to have, after a certain period of time, you have a follow-up scope, and they can reassess to see if that lining has regrown. Because if it hasn't, then you understand that there might be other issues. But for me, I never had the follow-up, which was what was kind of strange. And I did recover very well being only gluten-free. But of course, when I started to cut out all grains and all the other commercial gluten-free food, when I went AIP, that made the biggest difference to my gut. Looking back at all the other tests, I think most of them I had were a complete waste of time. They were just really reaching, especially things like cerebral angiograms and all sorts of horrible things. But most of the other things I thought, were important. Well, for me, I think that was important.
And I think too, with it's pretty good for me here in Australia. I'm not sure what the health system's like in South Africa, but I know for a lot of people in America, it can be incredibly expensive to have all of those different sorts of tests. And so I think in some cases you really do need to pick and choose very carefully what things to have in order just to manage from a financial perspective, because that's the whole thing about chronic illness. There's a massive financial aspect. I know my natural desiccated thyroid is quite expensive here in Australia because I have to get that compounded. It's not on our government scheme, on the PBS. There's the supplements that I take. There's a whole lot of different things that all add up to help me achieve the best possible health. So, it can be, I think sometimes there's so many to play in terms of what you pursue.
For sure. And I'm just exceptionally fortunate that I happen to be on private medical care in South Africa, because our government health care is really exceptionally bad. And I'm not sure anyone with people with acute illness struggle in South Africa to get treated with national health, never mind chronic illness. So I am very fortunate that I'm on private medical care. But even the private medical care, you've got to argue about everything. They don't even pay for my natural desiccated thyroid. And that's also expensive because we actually import, the one that's available here is actually imported from Thailand, funnily enough. And that's the only one that we can get here. And then they won't pay for things like my T3. They say they need motivation for why you would want to test T3, because the standard is only to check TSH and T4, not to check T3. So silly things like that. And yes, you've got to be careful. And most of the all the functional medicine tests that I have done, none of that is covered by medical care, which is why I had to do mine little bit by little bit by little bit, because it was so expensive. Because most of them are done in US dollars or in pounds. So with the exchange rate, that was really, really tough to do most of those testings.
It's a similar situation here.
Yes.
I think particularly with thyroid, there's so many strikes against you. There's the first one, trying to get a diagnosis, which is a difficult one. There's the second one of trying to get a doctor to actually tell you whether you have Hashimoto's or a non-autoimmune condition, because they don't believe it makes a difference because the treatment is the same. Then when you do try and get the proper full range of the thyroid panel, including your T3, your verse T3, all those different things, if you get a doctor to agree with them, you have to pay them. But even when you get the doctor to agree and you're ready to pay, sometimes when you go to the lab to get them drawn, they will make an arbitrary decision that they're not going to do the test. So when you get the results back, you don't get all the information because they've decided not to do it. So there's a whole lot of different things that can get in the way.
It's terrible that medical care has to be a fight. And especially when you're not well, it's very difficult to do all those things. And when you've got a lot of brain fog or you're very fatigued, and now you still got to fight for your own health. And then those of us that actually know the stuff and understand it, we're even at an advantage. The people that don't understand it or are still learning about it, they have to struggle even more. And that's why you become at the mercy of sort of the great big medical system.
Mm. And you can see why so many people then, feel like giving up and saying, well, it's just not worth it because it's too overwhelming.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's why I think it's, sorry.
Go ahead.
That's why I think it's so important to become educated about the things you can do for yourself, the things that don't require doctors and hospitals and medication and insurance and medical care, the things that changing your diet and sleeping more and resting and meditation and exercise and all of that isn't reliant on a healthcare system. That is the best way to kind of, if we can stay out of it, put it that way.
Exactly. And there are so many things that are under our control, which is the most empowering thing that I found for this. So we know that, different illnesses affect the body differently. Did having your illness change the way that you saw your body?
I think that's also one of those difficult ones because of the fact that I never really knew anything different, because my autoimmune disease probably started when I was 5 years old, when I lost a patch of hair on my head, and that was probably the time when it was already starting. So it's hard to kind of do a before and after, but for me there was definitely a stage where I hated my body. I hated the fact that I couldn't do things. I hated the fact that I was tired and fatigued, that I couldn't just go and pick up the pots of plants with plants in the garden and dig the pot and plant the roses, because my body didn't have the strength, or even if I did it, I'd end up in horrific pain afterwards. So it was a fighting with my body. It was a hatred of my body. From that perspective, it changed that. And that's also been a big learning curve of how to come to terms with that, how to come to terms with, this is my body, these are my limits, but there's so much I can do and so much I can't do, and this is the body I've got, and I've got to love this body and treat this body well in order for me to feel good about those things. So I suppose that's that's part of the healing process, if I can call it that.
And given that you've been sick most of your life without like really knowing what you were up against, when I read your book, I found myself actually a bit excited for you, because if you've gone so sick for so long and being able to do what you did, then imagine how, 10 more years down the track with really great nutrition and all of the knowledge that you have, there's a very real potential that you're going to feel better than you've ever felt in your life.
Wow, that's lovely to hear. It does sometimes feel like that. It feels like I always, people look back fondly as sort of their childhoods and teenage years. And for me, it's like, no, actually, I can't wait to be the age I'm at and to be older and fitter and healthier and stronger, because I was never those things when I was younger. I wasn't the look back fondly at my 20s kind of thing and think, oh, that was a great time, because that was a really, really horrible time in my life. So yes, thank you. That's it's a nice thing to say, but yes, that is, I guess, how I feel.
And that's I guess the attitude that I took towards myself, because I'm similar to you, only I wasn't as bad. I do think that my probably Hashimoto's manifested when I was at least 9 or 10 years old, and had been on a very slow simmer ever since. And with the celiac as well, it was just a very long, slow process, so that it just felt normal for me. And that was how I felt. So I just potted along until eventually my thyroid burned out completely and I couldn't go any further. So, and I think it's always looking back, you can see that it makes sense of certain events that happened in your life. And if you're talking about your illness to people who don't understand, what would you most want people to understand about your illnesses?
That's a tricky one as well. I guess it's important for people to know that just because a certain illness has a name, it doesn't mean everybody is affected by that condition in the same way. So you have Hashimoto's, I have Hashimoto's, but we're affected differently. You have celiac, I have celiac, we're affected differently. Even my MS is so untypical, which is why it took so many years to actually confirm my diagnosis of MS. There are so many different spectrums and kinds of autoimmune diseases. And yes, I have those 3 illnesses names, but I also have things like IBS, and I have migraines, and I have backache or other things. And those don't necessarily fit into an illness. And maybe they're caused by the autoimmune process, maybe they're not. A lot of my headaches and migraines, which is one of the things I still struggle with, is a hormonal aspect. And yes, thyroid obviously plays a part, but that's still something I struggle with. So everybody is unique with their illness, and it doesn't matter sort of what the name is. What matters is how you're feeling, how you treat it. Look at each of us individually and treat it like that, and see it from that perspective. I'm not sure if that answers that well.
No, it does. And I think that's a great point, because I know when I first got sick and people found out what I had, there were so many people saying, oh, yes, my grandmother's got that. She takes a pill every day. She's fine. And I started, even my doctor said, oh, yes, we know what, my original doctor that I ended up firing, he said, oh, yes, it's easily treated and managed. And that was not my experience. No. And I was not like so-and-so's grandmother who took a tablet every day and played golf and did her dancing and had a wonderful life. I mean, I was disabled. I always felt like I was dying. So I think that's a really important point, that people understand that we might have the same disease or the same label, but the way that affects us is profoundly different. And I think there's a lot of people see a label and they tend to trivialize it and think, oh, it's just get over it. It's just something, it's manageable, do it. And they don't understand the full, emotional, physical, psychological impact that it has on somebody's life.
For sure, especially something like celiac disease, which is treated with a gluten-free diet, which has received the most ridicule of any treatment of any disease in the world. And I even talk about that in my book a lot, that if someone with diabetes was treated the way someone with celiac disease is, people would be horrified. You wouldn't offer a child with diabetes, something with sugar in, but you offer a celiac, just have a bit of gluten, it can't hurt you. And that is a scary thing. And the fact that all of these illnesses are what we call invisible illnesses. We all generally look good on the outside. Nobody knows what we're suffering with. And when you tell people that you're doing this or you're doing that, they can't really understand. They can't really see it unless you've kind of experienced it yourself or you understand what that feels like. It's very hard to identify. And so it's easy to just miss someone. The amount of times I got said, oh, just have a little bit of this, or, just pick the croutons out of the salad, or just whatever the thing might be. And, that dismissiveness, it's not like we're wanting not to eat gluten. Wow, you don't think I would love to eat a nice big pizza right now? It's not like we're choosing it. It's that is not. In fact, we're incredibly lucky that it's one of the few illnesses that can be treated with something with diet, that we don't have to take medication for or something else for. It's one of the few things that we can do, to treat it. The biggest problem is all the gluten-free foods that are out there that are not true celiac-friendly foods, because they either contain small amounts of gluten, or they contain so many other gut irritants like the xanthan gum and the guar gum, plus all the other grains and genetically modified grains, that they're disrupting our guts as well. And that was a big lesson for me, thinking, just going gluten-free was fine. It took me to get my diagnosis of my MS to say, well, hang on a minute, my gut is obviously still not right. You know, I need to do something else about that. And stopping all those commercial gluten-free biscuits, gluten-free cakes, gluten-free cookies, breads, all of that, all the good stuff, that dramatically changed things for me, hugely.
And I think
overnight.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I know that some people on the ARP take a while to have noticed a difference. I was one of those people, even though I was completely gluten-free, changing to the ARP within like 2 weeks, I was totally different, feeling fantastic. And look, it plateaued off a bit, but to begin with, it was fantastic.
No, it definitely changed my life because I was only on 50 micrograms of thyroxine then. And as sick as I was, the first thing I did was I changed my diet. And, you know, if I had to sit at a stool and make my food, then that's what I did. And many times I was so sick that, you know, I sat at the kitchen table and supervised my sons to make the meal for me. And it did. I credit that with keeping me alive and helping me into recovery. Yeah. You're right, that people with celiac disease, it gets trivialized. And people get really angry when you can't eat their food. They get very angry and very resentful, and yeah, you can get a lot of rulings like that when you refuse to eat something, and they just don't understand the effect that it has on you. And I think part of the difficulty is that a lot of people with celiac disease are asymptomatic, and my son was one of them. We didn't find out that he was a celiac until I got sick, and then the doctor suggested that we get him tested. And such how much better he feels removing gluten, but he wouldn't have known up until then. He had some ongoing gut issues, but he just thought that was normal.
Wow, that is massive lesson. That is, and they say that the amount of undiagnosed celiacs walking around is huge, and undiagnosed with Hashimoto's as well. But that's another issue because they're not actually testing antibodies. But yes, that's quite scary. And I'm very pleased for your son that he could get sorted out early enough, because of course he could end up with contracting other autoimmune diseases if it hadn't have been treated. And
exactly.
might not have even known he had celiac in later on as the root cause even.
Oh yes. Yeah, the first thing we did was get the blood tests and got his thyroid levels and everything tested. And I still say this to him because he's 29 now. And of course, it's very tempting for somebody of that age because there's lots of eating out. And I just said, you don't want to end up with what I have.
Yes.
And if you keep doing, you know, eating gluten, there's a really real chance. You know, there is the what do they say, that genetics loads the gun and the situation or whatever pulls the trigger. So, you know, if you're going to be eating the wrong things, then, you know, you could end up with this. And because the research is out there that people don't end up with just one autoimmune disease, they end up with a minimum of, you know, 3 to 5. Exactly. And I have 3 and I don't want any more.
Yes.
That's it. But I know, because I was probably sick for so long, that there is a very real chance, despite what I'm doing, that I may go on to develop something else. But
I know that,
you know, that's the way it is.
Yes, I know that fear very well. Every time you have something going on, you think there's the possibility, well, there still is always the chance that I might have something else that I don't actually know about going on in the process, which is not a very nice feeling.
Yes.
Yes.
And what changes have you made to your life? I think you've alluded to a couple of them that have given you the best results and helped you create better health. And which one was the most challenging?
For me, the biggest one was changing to the ARP, the autoimmune protocol diet. I read Sarah Ballantyne's book, The Paleo Approach, and I loved her book because I'm one of those people that likes to know why I'm doing something. So for me, it explained it instead of just saying you have to do this. So I understood why, and I'm also an all or nothing person. So for me, I started almost immediately. In fact, I was even still in hospital And I started, or at least paleo, because I ordered from the gluten-free, dairy-free menu from the hospital, and only just was still having eggs. But otherwise, I did begin almost immediately. And for me, that made the biggest difference. And for me, one of my the easiest ways to know that something is working for me is that I no longer feel the need to sleep in the afternoons. That's always the first sign that things aren't great for me, because I'm really tired in the afternoons. And I didn't need to sleep in the afternoons anymore. I was sleeping well at night. I had energy and my headaches lifted. Just my mood improved. I felt amazing. I do think that it's important to emphasize that ARP is just the starting point. There are a lot of foods on ARP that I actually can't eat. I know there's a big thing on onions, garlic, cauliflower, broccoli, and with a lot of my gut issues, I can't tolerate a lot of those high FODMAP foods. I sometimes can have the broccolis, cauliflower, but I can't touch garlic or onion. That really just disagrees with me. So I do think it also needs to be individualized, which I think is important. There are a lot of things that work for some people and don't work for others, but it was certainly a starting point, eliminating all the the high inflammatory foods. That for me made one of the biggest differences. And then the lifestyle components, which tend to also get overlooked. But sleeping is never really an issue for me. I have trouble staying awake, not trouble going to sleep. So that wasn't a major one. Mine was more the relaxing parts, the mental parts. So I needed to do more meditation. I have done a bit of yoga, but it does put quite a bit of strain on my wrists. So I do struggle a bit with that. But I do walk my dogs. That's a huge one for me, for mental benefits. Like I said, not putting the pressure on myself. Educating myself, all those things have been huge. I listen to every webinar I can, or every blog, and read everything I can about this way of living, not to the point of obsession, but to the point of helping myself and self-empowering myself. So that was huge.
And did any of your relationships change, Yael, as a factor of being chronically ill and changing your diet?
Again, that's also one of those tricky ones, because of having always had it. Change is difficult, but I'd say it affected the kind of relationships I sort of chose, if I can put it that way. Like, so for me, trying to meet somebody when I was younger, I didn't ever think a boyfriend would ever manage with dealing with my issues. And so that was a big one. I do have a wonderful, supportive husband now, but it's also been very difficult for him. It's difficult for anyone to understand someone else with a chronic illness. And he actually even said to me, "You've had this your whole life. I'm new to this. I've got to get used to it." And so he had to kind of figure out, how do you deal with somebody that might have something wrong every day, something different, which is pretty darn awful, especially if somebody's complaining and moaning about the things they have. How do you deal with that? So I think that's a huge one. Yeah.
And just on that topic, what advice would you give the partner and the family of someone who's just been diagnosed with your illnesses?
I think the biggest lesson is patience. It's not always easy to do that, but if you don't have it yourself, it doesn't mean you can't understand it. But you need to understand that they are not making up what they're going through. They are not over emphasizing it or just complaining for the sake of complaining. They more than likely really want to get well and just don't really know how. And they need your guidance and your support and your patience. And yes, what's also really important is for them to also have their own time or their own space to do things that are not around you and involving you and your illness. So that is important, that they are supportive and are there for you, but then they also have the time to maybe do other things that they enjoy that are separate from you, it's okay for them to just go off and do that, and know that they still support you and still love you and still care about you. But it's okay for them to also, the caretaker also takes strain in a relationship when someone's not ill. And if they have to be strong and supportive, they also need that care and support. And we can give that to them sometimes, but sometimes we're not well enough to do that. So that's why I think it's important that they have their own way or escape or whatever it is to look after themselves, so that they can also look after you.
So Yael, it's been so fantastic talking to you and meeting you, and I'm so grateful that we're able to set this up and make it happen. Can you take a moment now just to tell people about your book, like a little bit about your book and where they can find it, and where they can find out more about you?
Okay. Thank you, Kerry. It's been lovely chatting to you, and thank you for the opportunity. My book is called Taking Control, My Journey to Reverse Autoimmune Disease, where it's actually a memoir. So it's not a how-to book or gives you recipes. It is a story of my life from my childhood, the illnesses and things I suffered with, my struggle to get those diagnoses, all the invasive tests and things I had done by the medical profession, my relationships, my life, and then what I did to help me heal, to get better, to get well on this journey, because it is a journey. It carries on every day. My book is in a Kindle format only at the moment and is available on Amazon. So you can download it and read it at your leisure. And you can find me, my website is www.reversingautoimmune.com. And I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, all the social medias, either as Reversing Autoimmune or Yael Goodman. I'm on some other of each of them.
You are busy, Yael.
Yes, I am.
Well, thank you so much. And I can just tell everybody that, I have read the book and I left a little review on my Facebook page, and it's a really great read. And like Yael said, it is a memoir of her life, and, the way that she lived it, and the full impact of her life on every single level and everything that she went through. And I think what I really love most about you, Yael, is your incredible determination and your fight for yourself. Because while I was reading it, sometimes I think I honestly don't know if I could have gone through what you've gone through. So I really take my hat off to you. You are a true autoimmune warrior woman.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Thank you for your kind words. I really do appreciate it. It's been lovely getting to know somebody like you. You're a real inspiration to so many people. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And I'm looking forward to coming back in the future. I've got another interview lined up already, been a bit slow off the mark because, this autoimmune thing, it does sneak up on you and get you down sometimes. So I'm looking forward to bringing some more interviews to you in the future. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.